Dude, I'm not hearing anyone out. Traptrix, one of the most interesting archetypes in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I figured it was the perfect one to give a little deep dive as we enter the month of October. You know, Halloween, and people are creeped out by bugs and even weird carnivorous plants, right? Because that is what every monster in the Traptrix archetype is based on. Yeah, sure, they look very human, sometimes to their detriment because of the nature of the artwork, but if you look very carefully at their artwork, then everything is not as it seems. Traptrix debuted in Judgment of the Light, and man, it's weird to think it was that long ago, but we started things off with a pretty simple wave, only having 3 monsters. Traptrix Myrmeleo was definitely the most popular, being one of the pillars of a very popular deck known as HAT, H-A-T, where the T stood for Traptrix. Anyway, as we'll soon find out with all of the Traptrix monsters, they're based on predatory insects and other bugs as well as carnivorous plants. Myrmeleo is based on the antlion, an insect that builds pits in the sand and waits for any unsuspecting prey. Traptrix Atrax is based on the Australian funnelweb spider, yet another bug that builds traps for prey. And lastly, Traptrix Nepenthes is based off of the Nepenthes plant, which if you know Pokemon, Victory Bell is based on the same thing. The point is that these 3 monsters, obviously being based around the Trap Hole cards, are actually a thematic home run. And even though they all seem to depict cute anime girls, if you look at the edges of the artwork you'll see hints of the actual true form, which we see in their signature trap card where we get to also see their full forms. But we'll talk more about these spells and traps after we finish up the monsters. For now, just know that that is the basic theme of every Traptrix. We see that extremely clearly with Traptrix Dionea, based on the Dionea muscipula, basically the quintessential carnivorous plant, the one that you think of every time you hear the word. And this one specifically, you can see the human form resting inside the mouth of the plant just waiting for somebody to walk by. Though in all these monsters it is kind of unclear if the human form is some sort of illusion, or if it's like physically a part of the actual monster, kind of like the old woman in the SpongeBob movie. I could have sworn that in some of the other artwork I saw them vaguely glowing or sort of transparent, meaning that they're like an actual illusion or something, but I don't think we really get the answer, especially given the fact that they're designed to be like full-on people with actual turnarounds. For now, we seemingly finish things off with the Xyz monster Traptrix Reflesia, based on the Reflesia plant, which I hear smells like rotting corpses, and so I would not want to get close. I'm actually going to take a moment to talk a little more about Reflesia, because in the recently released card game artwork book that shows off some concept art behind some of these monsters, there is actually a page on Reflesia, so we get some very interesting details, in terms of how the actual human form looks when standing up, and also some fun little doodles featuring the rarely seen true forms of the other Traptrix monsters, as apparently her fragrance is very nice, even attracting some of her fellow monsters, which explains why they're all hanging out together in the card artwork. And also a neat little thing, we get to see that the human form can actually like duck back into the plant, kind of a perfect way to lure in some unsuspecting people. The blurb from the artwork reads as follows, and I am using a translation from YG Organization as usual. I remember struggling about whether I should make the design similar to the past Traptrix or just move past it. If the design is similar, then the tiny differences will aggressively stand out, and if they are not similar at all, then there would be a lack of respect, is a thought that still crosses my mind to this day. As a result, I drew them with a slightly different feel, but because that's only what I see from my point of view, that is but my own interpretation. But yeah man, I really do wish that we would get even more artwork like this that shows little doodles or just the way that this monster would interact with others. But for the moment it seemed like this was a great way to round out the archetype, with 4 main deck monsters and an Xyz monster, and on top of that the Xyz monster actually depicts all of them together, really trying their hardest to draw you in. Though the popularity of these monsters both in the competitive scene and the casual scene meant that there was no way this is where the support would end. So I guess next up is Traptrix Mantis, a very easy one being based off of the Orchid Mantis, with all of the pink everywhere. Then we get Traptrix Genlisea based off of the Genlisea, a carnivorous plant that is also partially aquatic, so it makes sense that she's kind of like dipping her feet in the water here. Though this artwork I think focuses a little too much on like the human form, and doesn't necessarily show enough of the actual plant. I mean, I guess that is it in the background or kind of there in the water. Oh hey, there is also a little skull, so yeah, no, there's your sign for danger. Traptrix Genlisea is yet another monster that has some artwork featured in the art book. And what is really cool with her, we see a little more of the actual monster, but you know, on the back of the head, which is just like completely absent from the actual card artwork. But I think that is also kind of funny because I think for being a plant monster, it gives it a little more teeth, literally. And then also some of the funny personality that the doodles give it, like saying that it's good at acting and then showing how it would capture prey with the hair. That one's really fun. Then we get the first link monster, Traptrix Sarah, based on the Drosera. And sheesh, oh my gosh, seeing what the actual plant looks like is terrifying. You know, in all honesty, yeah, I know that carnivorous and other kinds of predatory plants are things that occur in nature, but when you really look at them, I honestly get like just straight up disgusted by them. Which is why in the fantasy world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Taking these kind of forms would be a lot more effective. But that is why I like the mix of artworks, how they look normal in the monster form, but then in the trap cards, then you really get to see all of the stuff going on. But yeah, like I said, we'll get to the trap cards in a moment. Then we get Traptrix Vesiculo based on the Aldrovanda vesiculosa. Oh boy, yeah, I got that name perfectly, I think. And this one I really do like how it incorporates the plants, both in the hair and in the sort of the dress look, which, I think they all had sort of done, but this one in particular I do like. And you do see even more dangerous plant monster in the top left and in the background. Then we get Traptrix Alamaris, based on the Alamaris decem-articulatus. This one actually marks the first extra deck insect type monster for the archetype. And what I really do like about this is that the creature that it's based on, I'm not trying to pronounce that again, is actually a type of ant that has a symbiotic relationship with plants. Their colonies actually basically build trapdoors inside of this plant and capture other insects that they then consume. So really I think that this is one of the first monsters that really drives home the fact that all of these monsters work together or interact with each other. As again, this one being an Xyz monster, you can see Mantis and Sarah in the background. Then onto another link monster, we get Traptrix Cularia, based on the Ultricularia. And Cularia has some artwork as well, and actually all the little translucent bunnies are part of the main body as well. I don't think that's necessarily something that we see in the actual plant that it's based on, but it does actually also kind of fit, especially when you see just how much they open up. This kind of artwork really does make me realize that I think a lot of these monsters need some sort of extra animation, or maybe if they were represented as 3D models like some old video games or the Duel terminal games, then that would be a really fun idea. And then we get the most recent Traptrix monsters from the extra deck that released not too long ago. Here we get Traptrix Pudika, based on the Nepenthes Pudika, again a type of plant that we've already seen before, as well as Traptrix Arachnocampa, based on the Arachnocampa. And do look at this creature, it's actually like really cool. It's a type of fungal gnat species that have a bioluminescent larval stage, and oh my gosh, I love bioluminescence, they look great. And it is kind of cool how we see that in the actual artwork of Arachnocampa, which by the way looks great as a holo. Yet another monster that has some concept art released for it. We can actually see that the weird little human form's hair goes even deeper and connects to the rest of the main body of the monster, even getting to see a little doodle of the mouth. And again, just other really fun doodles of it interacting with some of the other Traptrix monsters. But I do like even in the main artwork of the card, the parts that are hanging down glowing look very ominous. And you can even see like just a huge body of the actual grub right behind her. That one I think is really well done. Then we get Traptrix Pinguicula based off of the Pinguicula. Honestly, this is one of my favorites in terms of the artwork with just how dense the jungle is behind it, and how this one really does look dangerous. The actual bed of a plant is where things get digested, the one that she's laying on, as we can see two skulls right in front of her. And then of course being an Xyz monster, two more appear in the artwork in the background as well, those being Genlisea and Vesiculo. And this one is the final monster that we have concept art to look at. Some of these scribbles do note that it lures in slightly larger prey and that it's eaten a lot, showing how it's a little larger than some of the other Traptrix monsters. And yeah, trust me, that I noticed. The blurb in this one reads as follows. Its motif is after the Pinguicula, a carnivorous plant that captures its prey when it carelessly approaches a violet, which it's similar to, yet it's a slightly different plant. Making it stick there, digesting it and absorbing it, the tactic of disguising its appearance in order to prey makes one shiver. And if its disguise is that of a human, it's even more horrifying, because it's a plant it probably doesn't have a brain. From the point of view of the Traptrix, they are merely surviving, and it's unjustified that one is scared of them. While it's necessary for everyone to imitate others in order to become an adult, it sure is terrifying to be one that is imitated. So very interesting, I don't know who exactly ends up deciding the actual lore of like Yu-Gi-Oh cards, this again coming from the illustrator, but they at least see the Traptrix monsters as not even having a brain because, plants don't actually have brains. Again, this is Yu-Gi-Oh where even the grass is alive and can get up and touch you, but it does kind of contribute to the overall idea of Traptrix monsters, in that they're merely imitating humans and all they really want to do is eat. Then the final monster of the archetype, we had Traptrix Atypus based on the Atypus. And this one I find the artwork interesting because the human portion is depicted as like being trapped herself, as if setting a trap for some adventurer coming by and thinking that they could help someone, only to get ensnared in the webs. This one also has some concept art, and I do like also we get a little more detail of some of the outfit as well. One note saying that since it was based on a spider, that was given a whole knit sweater. I do also like how there's one drawing of it alongside the other spider monster, Traptrix, and how they're both practicing how to smile, which again is something that they would need to do in order to actually lure in people, because evil bugs don't know how to smile. And we also get a little peek at some of the main body, which we don't see the whole thing, but it's there just creeping and waiting. And I actually lied, we have like one more monster to talk about really quickly. This is a trap monster, Traptrix Holotea, based on the Abyssilla lutea. I always thought this one was interesting and it has concept art as well, though in a lot of the artwork and even the design it seems to be excluded from the other Traptrix monsters. Maybe because it is a trap itself, but also being a trap monster. I think it's a fun idea, because it gives the archetype something else to search. So even though that is where things end for the Traptrix monsters, like I said, we do actually have some spell and trap cards. I'll just talk about the spell cards really quick first. The field spell being Traptrix Garden, that mostly just shows Sarah in the middle, but again, you know, potentially luring somebody in, and then is Trap Tantalizing Tune, which depicts Reflesia and Arachnocampa. And this one also I think is a great idea because it ties into sort of the siren idea, because you know, maybe it's not enough that they just look pretty. If these are weird plants and insects that could actually vocalize to some degree, then yeah, that would definitely be extremely effective at luring somebody in. But when it comes to the other Trap Hole cards, I feel like we need to talk about Trap Hole in general. Yes, the entire premise of the Traptrix monsters is to search and utilize Trap Hole cards, which are an entire genre of their own. Obviously, it all started with the original Trap Hole that would destroy a normal summon monster. We would end up getting so many more Trap Hole cards with different requirements and effects, but the funny thing is they would actually end up developing their very own lore through the artwork. In many other cards we see these two monsters getting tricked into falling into a hole, and they end up forming a rivalry with each other. It's actually really funny, though these are not actual monsters or more placeholders. Oh, and there is also a knight that joins them later on. So the orange guy actually originated from Trap Hole, who in the old artwork is very amorphous, but he was kind of like softened up and solidified later. The green guy, even though he looks like it, does not come from Bottomless Trap Hole. That one is the same monster we see in Floodgate Trap Hole. No, this lighter green guy actually originates from Adhesion Trap Hole. And then finally the knight was first seen in Acid Trap Hole. But the two monster guys are really funny because in cards like Treacherous Trap Hole and Breakoff Trap Hole, we can see that the bait that lured them in was actually just a doll made to look like a woman. Yeah, not very convincing, but that would probably explain why they all fell for the Traptrix monsters, who are much more convincing. From what we can see in Giant Trap Hole, the two monsters and the knight fell underground somewhere. From there we see the following events depicted in Traptrix, where some of the actual Traptrix monsters are starting to lure them into their mysterious forest. And yeah, they do all look nervous and they're sweating, but maybe it's not because they sense any danger, maybe they're all simps. Because we find out in the card Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare that they all fell for it. This again is where we see the true forms of Traptrix Myrmeleo, Traptrix Atrax, and Traptrix Nepenthes. And there's even more follow-up in Terrifying Trap Hole Nightmare, where the green guy apparently didn't get fully eaten just yet, and instead fell for Traptrix Pudika's trap, and we also see Traptrix Mantis looking in on him. And oh my gosh, I think that's one of the craziest ones because, you know, seeing the true form of Traptrix Mantis is just like, sheesh, yeah, that's scary. It is cards like this that kind of make me wish we get even more trap cards that show the true forms of every other insect and plant monster, mostly the insect ones. And while these are all funny gag cards with the green guy and the orange guy, they just might have finally bit the dust, as the skulls we see in Traptrix Pinguicula kind of look a little like them. But anyway, that was kind of it for the history of Traptrix monsters, some of their inspirations, their lore, and their connection to Trap Hole, which has its own deep lore. Traptrix overall is such an interesting deck, and I really do like it in concept, even though a lot of the art is kind of controversial because of the human forms and how they're depicted. Well, these are just actually giant plants and insects and not the human-looking attachments or illusions, which I guess as we established for the plant monsters don't have actual brains. I get why people wouldn't like them. Personally, I think maybe they should have all looked like Pinguicula, or better yet, make them all freaks like Bug Princess. Otherwise, if you just enjoy the art or the gameplay or the lore, then you know, that's fine as long as you're not going too far in any way, because I think it does kind of discredit just how effective the art is. Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really credit their card artist, but the fandom figured out that a good amount of the Traptrix monsters were designed by Akane Fujiwara, who has done a lot of other Yu-Gi-Oh art. But yeah, it really does make sense because in a lot of the other monsters, we see things like big soft curves contrasted by hard edges, and I think that is the perfect kind of graceful danger that would fit for the Traptrix monsters. But yeah, dude, a lot of the other art is so good. Yu-Gi-Oh, please redesign the card borders and credit every artist in some way. But I hope that was a fun, spooky time, so let me know what you think in the comments below about Traptrix monsters, and be as normal and wholesome as possible when you tell me which one is your favorite. Anyway, this is GatorX, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, yeah, maybe not as big because this one took a long time to sit down and record, especially with all the stuff I had to pronounce, but you know, maybe we can do more stuff like this for smaller archetypes. But yeah, leave a like, comment, subscribe, hype the video, please. Anyway, this is GatorX, and I will catch you all later.